Pleased to be joined now by ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, and Dan's appearances on One Bills Live presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. Dan, let's begin here. The guy made his best case for MVP to date, I think. Josh Allen goes rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown, passing touchdown, all in the same game, and did it on national television to boot. Those are the kinds of things you need to do to vault yourself to the top of the list in the conversation. I realize there are other worthy candidates, but where do you feel he has landed himself after last week's performance?
Yeah, I think Josh is the favorite now, and it's Josh's to lose. Saquon Barkley would probably be the guy that is closest. On the same day that Lamar didn't play a good game, and that's two in the last 3 weeks that have kind of been subpar, at least to that MVP and his standard. And Josh dominates the game amongst others. It's Josh's to lose right now. He's playing too well. He's playing in a different method or a different way we've ever seen. He's absolutely doing it with less than others are doing it. And if it continues, over the next, 5 games, Josh will be the MVP finally, because it feels, and many of us say this, that have an MVP vote it feels like, oh, you could have given it to Josh that year. Well, you could have given it to Josh that year. And so, I think it certainly feels like his year.
Yeah, you get to this point of the season, and you kind of know who these teams are, and the one thing that changes it are the injuries. Certainly, San Francisco's going through it right now, even during this last game, and that's hamstrung their ability. They're only 2 games out, right? But you're running out of games.
Yep.
We were talking the other day. The Bills walked down the Miami Dolphins. They were down 3 with 5 to play, and people here in Buffalo thought, yeah, we're going to get them, and they did. The NFC West is a dogfight for San Francisco. We thought they would be desperate to win a game coming into Buffalo, and certainly the conditions were part of it. But, where do you see the two, where do you see the Bills right now in the big picture now that they've clinched the division? How do you handle the next 5 games, getting there healthy, staying sharp, but still having a shot at the 1 seed?
Yeah, I think you're taking it week to week if you're Sean McDermott and the Bills. You're just trying to continue to play your best version of football, and you certainly have your eye on that 1 seed. I don't think, I said this yesterday on Get Up, I don't think if the Bills get the 1 seed, I think they go to the Super Bowl. I don't believe that anybody's going into Orchard Park this year and beating this football team with the way that they can play. And I think that's a really important thing. So I do believe that you're very much so just taking it week by week. They got 2 really tough opponents coming up, the Rams coming up this week, and then obviously Detroit next week, but focused on the week to week, while also paying attention to what happens with Kansas City, and knowing that to get that 1 seed, or realistically to have the shot at it, you got to have them lose. And it certainly feels more realistic than ever that Kansas City could get knocked off at some point over the next couple weeks. So I think it's still, they've done such a good job of just being focused upon themselves that's very much so the message.
So, Dan, looking at this matchup for Buffalo with the Rams, they've got an exciting group of young talent on their defensive front. It's hard to ignore them on tape at all. They are just all over the place all the time. So that seems to be a calling card for them. Is there anything that you think maybe outpaces that for attention when you put the tape on of the Rams?
No, I mean, defensively, you can't. The main thing is you cannot let this group rush the passer. You can't. It's the best young defensive line in football. It's deep. They got a lot of athleticism. The thing is, and what you've seen for a couple teams start to really focus on when you play against the Rams defense is, number one, a lot of their run scheme is designed away from Jared Verse. Verse is their first-round draft pick. I think he's a University of Albany kid originally in college, so not all that far from Buffalo. He's a star, an absolute problem. So a lot of teams are running away from him to make sure, because he's an every down lineman, defensive end, not just a rusher. So teams are running away from him successfully, not letting him just blow the point up. And then the second thing is they're just not making plays on the football in the air on the perimeter, the Rams. They're just not. The corners are not making plays. They're not getting many PBUs. They're getting out competed for the ball in the air. And so, I would say for Buffalo offensively, it's a little bit more of who we are and what we do versus the Rams. I think you're going to see a heavy dose of that run game. I think you're going to see a heavy dose of that 6 offensive line grouping. They're not going to try and get cute. You're going to see your duo runs. You're going to see your weak zone runs that they're so good at. And then I think some of those, contested throws or aggressive throws to the perimeter where their size, with a Coop or a Mac, we'll see if Keon plays. I think their size pays dividends as well.
And, yeah, when you get out there, you're talking about, quick release passes, getting it out of his hands so you don't have to drop back and let those guys, let the defensive line eat. That. And what about play action? We saw, of course, the game was weird this last Sunday night against the 49ers. The Bills were under center a lot more than they had been because of the conditions. How does all that play into what they might do against the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, so the Rams for years now, one of the ways you've wanted to try to attack them is play action and their backers. I actually think the group has played better this season and really more recently than it has in the years past. I really believe this. If I look at my Rams notes, defensive notes, and I'll go back multiple games, but even the Eagles game couldn't stop when you just got downhill run. You go to the Saints game, couldn't stop when you got downhill run. This is advantage Buffalo. And this is really one of the unique parts about this offense is how capable they are of doing that. So I think this, again, the mindset for Joe Brady in this offense is they're not going to allow this pass rush to get going. They're going to get at you runs. They're going to force this young unit to handle the double teams. I don't think this is a Josh is the star of the football game again moment. I really believe the balance of this offense kind of has the opportunity to shine again. I don't think the Rams defense, and I'm a huge fan of Sean and the organization, I don't think they can stop Buffalo's run game.
All right, so let's flip it around to the other side because Stafford can still throw it with the best of them, as we know. His offensive line is a bit healthier than it was a month ago, which was, causing some issues there.
Yep.
And he's got Nakua and Kupp. What do we make of Kyren Williams as a back? I mean, he's closing in on 1,000 yards. He's had a nice season. So maybe just kind of encapsulate the skill positions for this Rams offense and what Buffalo has to be concerned about here.
This is the key to the game. This matchup will determine if this game has a chance in the fourth quarter for the Rams to win. Number one, two-headed monster in their backfield. Kyren Williams is fantastic. He's a great zone back. Blake Corum, they took out of Michigan, is not their change of pace guy. He's just the other back that comes in. He's also both of them are great in their zone scheme. Buffalo is going to see a ton of outside zone. This is a little bit throwback run game. Last year, Sean was pulling people a ton, McVay. This year, it's going to be a ton of the zone, and their receivers are elite blockers on the perimeter. Elite. So it is not all that different than Buffalo's run game with that least mentality. So it's going to be paramount for the edge to be set defensively. Those second-level defenders, whether it's going to be Taron, they're going to try to run a Taron Johnson. I'm telling everybody about it right now. It's just the philosophy of that offense. I think the secondary is going to have to set edges and tackle really well. So that's the number one run game that they'll get to. They'll get to it a bunch of different ways. And if they hit one early, when I say 6 or 8 yards, it's going to come for the rest of the game in just different formations. So that's the run that they're – go ahead.
So quickly, I was going to throw in there, Dan, with Milano back in the lineup now, it affords the Bills the luxury of having Dorian Williams as a strong side backer in a base set. Do you see any value in turning to that, or is it still not enough athleticism from a coverage standpoint that you would lose by taking Taron off the field?
Yeah, I understand the premise. I don't see that because you got to deal. The Rams run it with their receivers as the blockers because they're so good. So you make yourself super vulnerable to them getting into personnels, but then also one, their play action pass game is tremendous, and then two, they'll empty out in that stuff as well and just try to create different matchups. So that would be a dice roll to me just because how good the pass game with the Rams could be. I think the second thing outside of that outside zone, the two things that are really paramount is no team double motions the way that Rams do. So what I mean by that is they'll motion a guy over like a Puka. Puka's really the guy now. They'll motion him over. They'll get him set and they'll motion him again. And so the communication from Buffalo defensively, both in the run and the pass, will be huge because, when they set Puka to one side and they motion him over, well, that 2-man surface may become a 3-man surface. So everybody's rules changes. And so then you change your rule, and then 2 seconds later, it changes once again. So that's going to be huge for Buffalo's defense. And then really the play action pass, no doubt, is something that's paramount, but it's the bootleg keeper game for the Rams will be huge for Buffalo to handle and stop. They run it in a ton of different ways. They'll fake one way. Stafford comes going out to his right or left. He could do it both ways. And it's so difficult to handle because there's 4 different areas that he could throw the football to at any point. You could take your shot downfield. You could take a quick little flat right now. You could take the over route, and then they'll have this thing called like this late leak that's almost a late check down. So as a defense, think about it in this way, guys. You can't not pay attention to that run fake. So you gotta send your flow, your bodies, your gap responsibilities one way, but then you become very vulnerable to becoming out leveraged on that back side of it. And so I think those are the 2 things or 3 things for Buffalo defensively to just really have to hone in on because it's a big challenge.
Yeah, Brownie mentioned that their offensive line was going to get healthier. This last week, Demarcus Robinson got a hand injury, and also Stafford rolled his ankle. Nobody in the Rams sounds too concerned about Stafford's ability to go. How's the health of that team? I mean, it seems like everybody's beat up at this time of year, but if Stafford goes down, everything kind of goes on hold, particularly with his rolled ankle.
Yeah, Steve, I've played with Matthew for multiple years. You guys have the new age version of Matthew. I mean, his heart would have to literally stop working for him not to play. So he's going to play, and he'll be plenty of healthy. It's the same as Josh. Josh would have to be dead not to play in the game. So Stafford will play. I think their health is going to be okay. The offensive line, I know you guys have talked about this offensive line, at least expectation-wise, was going to be one of the best offensive lines in football this year. Injuries certainly were a massive part of why they started so poorly. The whole offensive line was gone. A lot of those pieces have come back. They're also not playing that way, though. They're still not playing to the way that they should have, specifically on the internal part of their offensive line. If you can get movement on that offensive line, you can have some success from a defensive front. I think health-wise, they'll be great. They know they're in playoff mode. The Rams got to find a way to win 4 out of their final 5 to probably get in and catch what feels like the Seahawks. So I think health-wise, they understand the kind of the urgency.
Last one before we let you go, Dan. Do you have something in your bag that would have prompted you to follow a behind-the-receiver throw in a goal-to-go situation just in the off chance that the receiver either A, fumbled the ball in the snow, or you entertain the thought of saying, hey, give it to me? Because according to Josh and to Amari, pure and unadulterated improv.
No, I don't have that. Of course not. I said we played it multiple times on ESPN yesterday. I said only that goon would make that play. that big 6-year-old in a 6'5", 240-pound body would make that play. I can't even wrap my brain around the 3-second time period of sure I'll go. It's like I'll go run after the ball. I would never do that. No. And then Amari's like the catch is absurd.
Right.
But then the awareness to do it. And I'm so glad he scored because if he went out at the 1, it would have been completely deflating and not worth it. But the fact that he scores, it's vintage Josh, and it's one of the rare highlight plays of his career. Not rare, but unique highlight plays.
That's why Steve calls him a golden retriever puppy, because that's really what he is.
Steve, I didn't want to say it. My dog is literally laying right here.
He's a good dog. Yeah, he's a good dog.
That's what he is, man. He's just follow the ball.
We're getting to a point now where there's a line of demarcation in the AFC. Last one for me too. It's going to be a fun end of the year. I mean, this playoff scenario with the 7 teams in each conference, every team in the playoff hunt for the AFC, starting with Denver, has a winning record. Every team that's out of it does not. It's an absolute clear line of demarcation. Not so much in the NFC, where Atlanta's leading the South 6-6, but still, this seems like there is a kind of clear mark of the haves, have not. The guys who can win those games have won a ton of close games. I think this playoff run here at the end of this season might be kind of special in both conferences.
I totally agree. The conferences are different. You know, it's a very clear in the NFC that there's 2 teams that are above everybody else. Are they gettable? Sure. But the Eagles and the Lions are probably the 2 best teams in football, the 2 most dominant teams in football right now. I'd probably put Buffalo 3rd there. But in the NFC, it's like you're going to have to catch them. I think you're going to have to catch both Philly and Detroit in like a B game to beat them. You know, I think Green Bay is capable of it. Ironically, I think if the Rams get in, they're capable of it. The South, the Bucks give me a little bit of how good can they play defensively. Washington, how hot can they be offensively? And the AFC, it's a little bit of a smorgasbord almost. You know, I do think that Buffalo has earned the right to say, hey, we feel like we're the best team right now. I've said this multiple times, with all due respect, you got to go through Patrick. When it's win or go home. Mm-hmm. It's not week 13, and we got to, when it's win or go home, to go through Spags and Patrick and Andy Reid and Kelsey and Chris Jones. That you got to go do it, and everybody knows that. But I do think that the AFC, anybody can kind of beat anybody. But I think if there's one team that feels this year to have a clear home field advantage, if it gets done, it's Buffalo.
Dan, thanks as always. Appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy.